Right, we're live both places. Hello, welcome to some Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
And today we're going to learn a little, or we're going to talk a little bit about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Before we do that, but you want to tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast.
On this podcast, we forget everything that we do on this podcast because it's been a week, and anytime we skip a week, it's like rediscovering some ancient ruin as archaeologists like years later. So obviously Frankenstein. This is the first movie podcast we've done in a long time, but Guillermo del Toro for a long time has basically said that his dream project is Frankenstein. He obviously won Best Picture for, I guess it was The Shape of Water, and then worked on his Pinocchio film, which ended up going to Netflix. He has been working on this for a long time in the background, including some sort of comments on previous adaptations of Frankenstein that he really loves or hates. He has a particular love for Kenneth Branagh's version from 1994, which is a wild movie and part of a wild set of movies that don't really make much sense in hindsight, but yep, that happened. Robert De Niro did in fact play Frankenstein in 1994, and it was kind of gross. And then this eventually became a project that was happening by Netflix. So Netflix kind of revived the project. They're I guess at the time now are trying to like push it into theaters. My understanding is that Netflix is making a big push for theatrical release for Frankenstein, which is good for all of us. But it stars Oscar Isaac as Victor Frankenstein, Jacob Elordi as the monster, and Mia Goth as not her name is not Mia or Emily. What is it? No, it is Emily, right? I can't
Uh,
remember.
yeah,
It was a week
as
ago
the
that I
woman,
watched this.
uh,
That's the girl. Yeah.
as the Mary Shelley self-insert.
Yep.
Uh, Technical note, buddy, I think your voice is a little bit blown out. You might be recording a little bit loud.
Oh Jesus! Oh, 1 second. Oh God, I am so loud. 1 second.
Um, but yes. What else? Oh, there's also is Christoph Waltz, is that his name? As uh the guy from Inglourious Bastards, the guy who plays.
It is Christoph Waltz who is playing the I can't remember the guy's name. The benefactor that
Yeah,
like funds Frankenstein's
Steins.
whole like research and everything.
Yeah. As I understand it, and it is fairly faithful to the book, at least more faithful to the book than most things. Fun fact: a thing I learned from watching this film is that Igor was made up entirely for the films. He is not in the original book because there's a scene where he's going to like the gallows, and there's a person that was like, "Oh, is this going to be where he recruits Igor?" And then he doesn't. And I was like, "Huh, I wonder if Igor was in the books." And it turns out he's not. But I guess let's give our. I mean, do we even have to do spoilers for this movie? Like, give it spoiler warning. I guess our pre-spoilers opinion of the movie. I guess we will put a spoiler wall.
My
But
pre-spoiler take of the movie is that it's okay and not great. Worse than I think it's punching below its weight class. Worse than the sum of its parts. It would be any other person's. Here's what I would say. Any journeyman director, who none of us know or care about, right? Like the guy who directed something like I don't even know. What's like a mid-budget movie that nobody cares about? Like a Marvel movie, right? Like John Watts would be a good example. He's the guy that does the Spider-Man. He's in all three of these Spider-Man Marvel movies. He did some indie horror movie before that I don't remember. If this guy directed Frankenstein, this would be his best movie probably, right? For Guillermo del Toro, who is kind of an all-timer at this point, or at least like canonized into sort of all-timer status, it is fine. Um that sounds harsh and in a certain sense, I do sort of think it is, and we'll talk about some of that at the sort of in the back half. But this is mostly me just like ranking Guillermo del Toro films on top of each other. Frankenstein is just, man, I'm just gonna keep hitting the sh in there.
Yeah.
From college German is really not doing is not doing me any favors on this one. Okay, whatever. I'm just gonna lean into it. Frankenstein is not going to play well against films from Del Toro that I just think are fundamentally superior, like Pacific Rim is, that's my favorite, but The Shape of Water is definitely better. And I would even maybe make a case that some of the schlockier stuff from Guillermo del Toro's early days is better than this. I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's okay.
There was a point where I wanted to, like, I remember watching. I can't remember exactly
Oh, I
what it
think I
is
need to
now.
let my cat out, but keep going.
Yeah, I would say let's just made her podcast debut a couple minutes ago. Um, but there was a moment that I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. There was something that pinged in my mind as being like Hellboy and like Shape of Water, in that same kind of way. But like I say, I cannot remember what it is for the life of me. But I think I would agree, that it was okay. A lot of there's this sense that I have, that there's this thing that happens with like faithful book adaptations, where there's some things that seem awkward, and my instinct is to say this is a thing that happened in the book and played out over a much longer set of pages, and so it got its breathing room, and thus was better served, and they did a disservice to the movie version by including it. And I'm not sure about this, but like the comparison point I would say is Nosferatu, from last year, where I thought something similar happened, where the subplot with the friends, the Harker, well, whatever their names are, the family with the friends, like that whole subplot, I thought could have probably have been cut and not damaged the movie too much, because it kind of went nowhere. And I think I think that was included mostly for fidelity to the book more than because it needed to stand on its own, or fidelity to the old film. I have not read Dracula. I have not read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. There's also some moments in here that, like, again, I'm not sure if it's fidelity to the book or just like Guillermo del Toro not understanding what subtlety is, which is like, him, like explicitly, like, Christopher Waltz explicitly calling Frankenstein Prometheus, or he said something like, I will be the eagle that eats your liver, or something. Like, I get it. I get that you're referencing the subtitle, right? Like, or like, I guess this is a spoiler. So I guess let's put the spoiler warning right here for Frankenstein, the concept. But like, there is a moment at the very end on the ship where he literally says, I was the monster, or, Frankenstein was the monster, not the monster, right? It's like, okay, good job, right? Like, you made the subtext text. And I also think, like, so my biggest complaint, I feel like, was that all of Victor Frankenstein's character development, I guess, happens while he's laying in the ship. Like, I guess the idea is supposed to be, like, as he's talking it out, he's like, I guess I am kind of a shithead, right? Like, because, like, he doesn't, like, earn, like, the end of the movie is, him apologizing to the monster and asking for forgiveness, but there is nothing in anything that has happened that makes me believe that he has actually changed his mind, because, as the story wraps back in on itself, we find out that immediately before the events of the first scene, he has attempted to firebomb the monster, right? Like, or dynamite the monster, and and I guess he has decided to turn over a new leaf in, like, the 2 days that it takes him to tell this story to the captain of the ship.
Yeah, I also think, and we'll get into this, I'm sure. I think I'm never going to like a movie like this one. I didn't particularly like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein when I read it in college, which was part of like a long running set of. There was just like a lot of literature from sort of around that time. I remember liking Dracula where I read it, which obviously comes from sort of the same sort of like Gothic period. And Dracula worked for me sort of as a novel in a way that, by the way, I don't think has ever been faithfully adapted. Like, I don't think there's a version of this movie for Dracula. Even weird stuff like Bram Stoker's Dracula doesn't really hit it. Um, and I sort of think my quibble would probably be that it's too faithful. That maybe I think maybe there's a version where I'm just willing to introspect and kind of say that, like, philosophically, I'm never going to agree with this story. It's always going to kind of ring weird and hollow and sort of false to me because it kind of just like it attacks the bedrock of my principles, which is kind of true for any mad scientist story. But like, I don't know, it does this kind of generally unsatisfying thing that I don't love, where it dimensionalizes kind of everything and everybody, um, such to a like to such a point where I kind of just can't grasp onto the themes that are at play. Do you know what I mean? Like, for instance, Frankenstein obviously does try and kill the, sort of the monster, but he goes back and forth on this several times and he gets punished for it. And it's like, is that just cosmic punishment? Is this the story trying to attack him for his hubris? I don't know that there are really great answers to these questions. I don't really know that the book is good at answering them, and so when you are deeply faithful to the book in your movie adaptation, you're just kind of carrying that baggage forward to now, right? So I don't even know. What did I just say? I guess this is the reverse end of me making a point that I make commonly on the podcast, which is that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? That the stuff that is coming out in our modern era has been refined by however many eons of storytelling, whatever, right? Because this is such a classic sort of story, it feels like it leaves a lot of, I don't know, stuff on the cutting room floor maybe that bothers me. And I wish it had a clearer, more incisive sort of vision for what it was sort of getting at, both in a questions and answers kind of position. So I don't know. There's that.
Huh. Fair enough. I'm going to ask you to dilate on that in a second, but um, I do want to shout out this comment from Hyperindexed saying, "Of course, Guillermo del Toro understands subtlety. Have you not seen his role as Fat Man in Death Stranding? Sorry, Dead Man." So I will say that one's not on Del Toro. That's on Hideo Kojima.
Yeah. I actually think that Guillermo del Toro really doesn't understand subtlety. He is the meme of, I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards. Because like when I think of his best movies, they are dramatically unsubtle, right? Like there's the whole subplot in The Shape of Water where the creature bites off Michael Shannon's hands, right, or fingers, and he tries to reattach them, but they never quite take, and so he becomes literally like rotten or whatever. It's like the most unsubtle metaphor. I think the only filmmaker in all of Hollywood who less subtle than Guillermo del Toro is probably Zack Snyder. And so like when you're doing frankly the same thing that Snyder does sometimes where you try and make very complex meditative narratives on sort of whatever, you tend to just get lost in the sauce, versus someone who like a good counterpoint to this would be like Denis Villeneuve would be a great counterpoint to this, right? This is somebody who can take even a very straightforward kind of story and add tons of corners and rounded edges that make it really interesting and give it a ton of texture, right? Who can like elevate that kind of thing. There are some people who just kind of need to stay in very kind of conventional storytelling structures, and it's why The Shape of Water, which is an extremely straightforward story, but told in told excellently, right? Told emphatically excellently. So excellent that it won the Oscar, right? Great, beautiful. Pacific Rim, same thing, right? A straightforward, no nonsense action,
Yeah, the depth in
action
Pacific
movie.
Rim is the world building, right? Which you can get like they're all technical details rather than like narrative details.
Exactly. And just because a story is told conventionally doesn't mean that the characters aren't complex or they aren't. I think one of the things that makes Pacific Rim so good is that those characters are actually quite great. There's a number of different characters, all who pop up, and you can tell that they have a lot of personality and depth to them. Even just things like the Australian father-son duo who kind of play the Iceman role. Have you seen Top Gun? Do you understand that reference?
No, I haven't
The
actually.
like friendly rival sort of thing.
Yeah, I get that.
In Top Gun, you have Tom Cruise,
Yeah, I'm familiar with the
Maverick, and
trope.
then
Yeah, like it's
okay,
the
yeah.
protagonist and the Lancer, basically, right? Like,
Yes, exactly, basically, right? Like it's very good, straightforward, efficient storytelling is kind of what's happening here. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is not those things. It actually is those things in sort of bursts. And those are when the movie is at its best. But basically as it goes on, it tends to get worse. And so, you know,
yeah,
there we go.
do I agree that it gets worse as it goes on? I don't. It just feels like I know, like an only vaguely connected set of what's the word I want to look like store like vaguely connected set of scenes.
Vignettes, maybe?
Vignettes, yeah, that's probably what I'm looking at, and then maybe that's just because of the middle one where Frankenstein goes and lives on the farm, like the monster rather goes and lives on a farm, um, because like I I don't know, maybe it's got like the Mass Effect, what I'm going to call the Mass Effect 2 problem. But like I didn't dislike Mass Effect 2, but it felt weird to be playing that game because I was like, okay, I'm going to do all of these character missions and then I will do like the actual story. But it turns out that like 90% of the game is the character missions, right? Which isn't a problem. It's just kind of not what I was expecting. And I feel like you get at some of that here, which is like, oh,
That's so funny because that's exactly what I love about Mass Effect 2. But I totally understand what you're getting at. This is like a pacing problem, right?
right.
So, for instance, I think the movie is at its best. I guess are we in spoilers? Are we in spoilers?
Yeah, we're in
for
spoiler
an 18th
territory.
century
Yeah.
Gothic novel, you guys? The portion where Frankenstein is putting together the lab with the benefactor and he's getting this stuff, and it's less than a montage, but more than like an act or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like there are real scenes that are playing out, but they're playing out pretty quickly and in a pretty staccato fashion. And you're watching him sort of like put together the very famous kind of like factory laboratory thing where he is going to reanimate the sort of monster. I think that is when the movie is at its best. And it's because it's when the movie is at its just really like punch to the face, straightforward, right? There is one guy who has this insane drive to see if he can, and he's pushing as hard as he can in order to kind of make that happen, right? And this is also when the movie kind of gets into some of its mad scientist sort of things. I kind of feel like I would argue that Victor Frankenstein is not actually a mad scientist in like a super traditional sense. I don't know. There's less mania. Maybe Oscar Isaac is just like too good. There's less mania to what Victor is doing in this movie than previous iterations of Frankenstein. But like also kind of more weight and stakes put on it, which I like quite a lot. His confrontation with God, Christoph Waltz, whatever the case is, the Baron, right?
Yeah.
His confrontation with the Baron is excellent and probably like the high point of the movie. You almost could have made, I don't even know, like a TV show or something out of it, and this would have been the second episode, let's say, and it would have been the best episode. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because like it's funny that you say he doesn't have it's because like the Baron wants him to put the brain he wants to put his brain inside the monster, I guess, right? And Frankenstein's like, no, what are you talking about, right? Like, which is very much kind of like a very reasonable thing to do. I wonder how much of this is like, again, talking about fidelity of the book, is like, one, if Victor Frankenstein is the original mad scientist, right? How much, has X number of years of iterating on the concept kind of flanderized, I'm going to say, the concept, right? Like, in order to be a mad scientist, you actually have to be like kind of like cackly rather than just be like, slightly off. And how much of this is also rooted in kind of like the cultural context of the time is what I'm going to say, right? Like, we're like, like there are, it's kind of like biblical references in that, like, everybody kind of like, up until like, 50 years ago, everybody would just kind of naturally get biblical references because of like the kind of the nature of the Western world, and kind of like obviously, just leave it at that, the nature of the Western world, and like the kind of heresy and insanity of trying to give life to something, create life from nothing, is maybe a thing that would be more kind of like on its face crazy, right? Like, in the same way that, like, if someone tried to, like, I don't know, if someone thought they were a chicken, maybe, right? Like, you'd be like, oh, that person's crazy, in kind of like the modern context. Like, a thing that would, like, code is obviously crazy. It doesn't quite code as crazy now because we are less religious, less kind of like adherent to that worldview that would have made it more kind of like on its face crazy at the time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does. I sort of wonder, this is the part where I feel like my own kind of like ethical principles are like at play in a way. I think I think the movie is sort of trying to make the case that Frankenstein never should have even gone down this road in the first place, right? That the ultimate apology that he's making isn't just about kind of like the heights of his mania. It's about even toying with this, with death kind of in the first place. And I'm thinking about that first scene where he's in the college and he gets kind of like rebuked out of the college. My read of that scene is that unfair injustice is being perpetrated against a man who is pursuing science, and these oppressive, whatever, judgmental gatekeepers who are keeping, him from that goal are bad, right? But I sort of think the movie wants me to be on their side, on the prejudicial gatekeepers, because the thing he is doing is on his face horrifying, right? Of animating kind of this half person corpse thing, and throwing the ball, and it's not a ball, it's an apple. You're throwing the apple to it and it catches it, but it has like all of these like tendons and stuff like that. I think that's cool. I think that's kind of like neat, sort of like philosophically. But I feel like the movie sort of is making the case that even there, what Victor is doing is pushing too far.
I think maybe this is part of the problem with the movie, is I think the book wants you to think that, right? And I'm not sure that the movie does, but the movie is trying to be faithful to the book. And I think that those things working at cross purposes kind of confuses the message at a point, right? Because, like, I don't know, like, what is like the tragedy of the monster is that, like, he can't die, I guess, right? Like, it's, and again, I haven't read the book, but the movie makes it very clear that, like, he is not guilty of anything really, right? Like, even, like, kind of like doesn't seem to even want to like cast moral judgment on the monster for the violence he perpetrates against the other things, because he's kind of a victim of circumstance more than anything else. Um, but I do think that, like, maybe the issue here is it's not about the act itself, but it's about Victor's arrogance, right? Like, that is probably what this is getting at, right? Because it feels like it was meant, like the modern Prometheus, right? I feel like it's meant to like echo like Greek myth, right? And at that point,
Yeah,
the sin is the hubris, not necessarily the act.
and in a certain sense, the refining of Frankenstein that kind of has happened since the publication of the book has pushed in that sort of direction, because Frankenstein himself is much less humanized in basically every other
Mm.
adaptation, and kills a lot of people, right? Which puts the real onus onto, onto Victor. Part of what I feel like the movie is kind of missing from sort of a thematic point of view is, if I were to, it's tough. This isn't quite a mad scientist movie, but it is, shall we call it a mad science movie, is like Jurassic Park, right? The moral of Jurassic Park and Frankenstein are supposed to be basically the same, right? There are some things you ought not
Me and play
do.
gods, right? Like,
Exactly. Do not play God. Sure. In Jurassic Park, we watch Do Not Play God play out to devastating consequences for the people on this island. Half of the people that are there get killed by these dinosaurs that were recklessly and arrogantly understood to be within, I guess you could say John Hammond is really the ultimate sort of antagonist for that. John Hammond's control, basically. But Frankenstein is the monster, I should clarify, is not so nakedly destructive that is the problem that it once was when Frankenstein became kind of a horror movie icon, where he gets created and then he goes and kills a bunch of people, and now the moral weight of those murders are on Victor. What is the real crime that Victor has perpetrated here? What is the thing that Victor is so horrendously and painstakingly, just agonizingly guilty of, that he has to apologize in these final moments of his life in this ship or whatever? That actually sort of remains unclear to me, right? The real sort of moral stakes are all handled on these other sort of beings or people or whomever. Frankly, I think maybe the best case you could make is around the Baron, who dies, right? And Victor covers up his death and then blames his death on the monster, and maybe Victor mistreats the monster in the basement and stuff like that. Okay, fair enough. But both of those have these kind of insane mitigating circumstances of, number one, the Baron makes a truly unhinged request at the last moment, tries to fuck up Victor's experiment in spite, slips and falls, and then when Victor tries to save his life, he plummets to his death. How is Victor at fault for that? You know what I mean?
yep.
He's at fault for the lie later that he tells to his brother, and he tells to, God, I keep wanting to call her Emily. Catherine, I think is her name. But he's not at fault for that death, right? And then when it comes to the creature itself, he's in literally uncharted territory. All the creature has demonstrated is an understanding of one word, and Victor now finds himself sort of chained to the failure of his own experiment right in front of him. And sure, he tries to kill the monster, which is terrible because we understand that the monster does have real humanity. But also at the same time, at that time, Victor doesn't. Victor thinks that this thing is barely better than a parrot. What is the difference morally between him and a dog? Not all that much to Victor's brain. So I also kind of want to absolve him of that. I think if I'm making the Steelman case against what I'm about to say, maybe the best possible version of this is around jealousy and Catherine. The way, God, is her name fucking Catherine?
So I'm gonna punch in because I think that part of like a maybe all of this is just Victor's like refusal to take responsibility for anything
It's
he
not
does.
Catherine, it's fucking Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Holy shit! How did I get this so wrong? Yeah, it is not Emily. It is Elizabeth. It is also not Catherine. Elizabeth.
So I think a big part of this is Victor's failure to ever take responsibility for anything that he does. Right, like this is again most favorable to Victor happens in the college, right? Like, where he's defending himself against the kind of against the judges, and the scene is definitely played as like, well, Victor is in the right here, but he's not owning to his stuff. I think that the thing that kind of the only example that you're missing where it's much less ambiguous is Victor shoots Elizabeth and blames it on the monster, right? Like that's which I think is kind of like the kind of apotheosis of this, right? Is like he he does not take responsibility for basically anything that happens, right? Like
Yeah,
and
I guess that makes
and,
sense. I
and
was going to say that the worst thing, the Steelman case against the argument that I'm making is probably about Elizabeth. That what Victor believes when he is trying to kill the monster is not that the monster is a failed experiment who he has a responsibility to put down, which is sort of how it is presented at first. It's actually about jealousy because Elizabeth is clearly drawn to the monster in a very Del Toro sort of fashion. And Victor is angry because Elizabeth has repeatedly spurned his advances. I don't know. I mean, I do think that the story is a little bit about that. Even him shooting Elizabeth is like it's an accident. Well, I don't know. I mean, whatever. It's fine. He's trying to
no,
kill the monster, obviously.
right, but it's an accident, but it's a thing that he did, right? The same, like
Yeah,
it's
true.
his initial response is not to say, this is a thing that happened and it was an accident, right? It's to say I didn't do anything wrong. It was it was the monster, right? Like,
Yeah.
um because maybe because that's like the easy way out, like killing the monster is the easy way out. I don't know. I feel like
Yeah,
there's
I also don't know, but I do feel like
I feel like I
that's
should
fair
be
enough.
reading like Cliff Notes on Frankenstein. What are the major themes of Frankenstein?
Yeah, I also haven't read Frankenstein in 15 years, so my memory of it is quite hazy, right? Like, how much am I really matching out of this? I think part of it also is that I like Oscar Isaac quite a lot. Something I found myself thinking about was this dynamic of monster Elizabeth Frankenstein. In The Shape of Water, I empathize with the fish and with the woman whose name I don't remember. And I hate Michael Shannon, right? Michael Shannon plays the oppressive authoritarian bad guy who uses the shock rod to buzz the monster all the time, right? In this movie, my my sort of empathy is completely different. I have so much empathy for Oscar Isaac as Victor Frankenstein, and maybe it's just because I like Oscar Isaac. I think Michael Shannon plays bad guys and looks like a bad guy, and I like to hate him, just naturally. Oscar Isaac is probably the most famous Latino actor. I like Oscar Isaac. He looks like me. He's in movies I like. He was, in a bunch of movies by some of my favorite like all of those kinds of things. Are those playing with kind of my, my perceptions where I'm jumping to the defense of one, whereas in the other, I would never make the same kind of case about Michael Shannon, even though Michael Shannon clearly thinks the monster is just a fucking fish. And you could hypothetically make a similar sort of set of
well,
arguments.
I think that the problem here is that the monster isn't like the monster is not like as soon as we understand that the monster has like moral agency, which is after he goes and goes and lives in the grist mill, right? Like his actions are not entirely justified, right? Like it's like, oh, he like kills a bunch of, he like breaks a bunch of stuff and kills a bunch of people. Not to the effect that he's like a total monster, but he's kind of like he is not sinless, right? He's not innocent, which is which is his status kind of like up until he goes through the farm arc, we're gonna say.
And this is part of my thing. Like that in my mind kind of absolves Victor of his, culpability in a way. Because at the time, the creature, the monster, is not demonstrating, that moral agency. It takes the only after Frankenstein tries to kill the monster, does the moral agency sort of appear. And then when the monster comes back into Victor's life, it's aggressively and making these demands or whatever. Sort of the rest of that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I would say
Yeah.
like the only exception I'd take to that is that when Elizabeth gets more out of the monster when she visits the thing, right? And so like the part of that there is that the maybe this is just who the point of view character is, but the difference between the Michael Shannon and Victor is that like, well, Elizabeth shows up and like immediately gets more words out of the monster by being nice instead of being a dickhead to the monster, right? Um, and I guess part of that there is supposed to be like, oh, Victor's just kind of a shitty dad, right? Like, but also we also see that he tries really hard for like the first X number of days and just doesn't kick in, and I don't know.
It's not day. It's months.
Sure,
This is the
yeah.
part that's crazy to me,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't know. There was this part of me that makes me think of what it would be like if I was in this, you know, mad scientist sort of realm where I am dealing with something truly. There's this other part. Okay, there's this other part that is going to like hit on a hobby horse of mine, which is I'm sorry, Rachel, if you're listening to the podcast, you can just fucking mute this shit right now, okay? Which is Coco the gorilla.
Oh, God.
We've talked about
Can I
Coco
mute the
gorilla.
podcast
No,
right
no,
now?
let this go. Just to explain, Coco the gorilla could not speak English, right? But that was the popular conception, right? That we taught a gorilla sign language. Coco the gorilla could speak sign language. But like when you attack that scientifically, no, that's not the case, right? Only humans are capable of complex language, basically because human language is vocabulary plus grammar. Animals don't have an understanding of grammar. They do have an understanding of vocabulary. It's why you can take your dog for walkies, whatever. All that stuff makes sense, right? From Frankenstein's point of view, there's no reason to think that the monster is ever going to be better than the dog or the parrot or whatever else. It's a particularly human-like parrot, and he spends months trying to induce this thing in the parrot. But at a certain point, if you're on the cutting edge of fucking science and you can't get the monster to learn any other word except for Victor, you're kind of within your rights, in my mind, to kill it.
Oh man, that's I don't know if I agree with that as kind of as like a base assumption, but like that's like, this is like a lot of like decidedly modern debate about like, is it right to, unplug Terry Schiavo, right? Which is kind of like the most famous version of this, right?
I get it's a little bit less that. Terry Schiavo was a sapient creature who hypothetically lost that sapience, right? This is on the cutting edge of science, right? We have created something entirely new and we are testing it for sapience, and it is failing those tests. At what point is it okay to toss it in the fucking acid vat and start over, right?
Yeah.
I would say you have a lot of you would not say let's imagine a hypothetical reverse version of Frankenstein where the monster cannot develop sapience, right? Where whatever in this thought experiment the monster doesn't have moral agency or sapience or anything like that.
Part of the difference here is I'm not going to throw a parrot or a dog in the vat of acid either, right? Like, which is the comparison that you're making, right? Like, and like I get that, like, there's and a lot of this is hinging on like the kind of like particular cruelty of the method, right? Like, but yes, like retire the experiment in a way that like, like short of the moral valence of actually killing him, maybe I get that. But I also like, I do wonder if this is kind of like a, like, how like if you watch a, say, pre-2000s show or movie and there's like a legal scene and a little bit about the law, or you watch like a computer scene and you know a little bit about programming, you're like, that's not how any of this works, right? Like, we as modern people are watching this and we're like, this is not how any of this, like, you can't resurrect a man by injecting lightning into like the lymph nodes or whatever he does. But like Mary Shelley didn't know that, right? Because it's pre a lot of this stuff, right? This comes.
Yeah, it's like the first book of science fiction is whatever he says, right? It's the first book of science fiction,
right? And it's contemporary with the thing, like it in its place. It is like, it is the equivalent of like a near future science fiction story, right? Like a World War Z or something, right? Like, for its time. But we're obviously removed from we're whatever this is written, like late 1800s, right? Like what was the published date of Frankenstein?
It's in 1800s. I can't remember what it is. It's gonna be like 1858 or something like that.
1818. Yeah.
Wow. So that's actually earlier than I thought. But still, yep.
Um, it's so we're 200 years out from that, and so we as just kind of like our baseline, American public education, right, have a lot more understanding of how all this works than a than than Mary Shelley did, right? So how much of this is kind of like us projecting, like what I feel like this predates like the modern version of the scientific method. Let me look this up. Uh, Origin.
That's probably pretty true. I think it definitely underscores something. Part of my greater point, basically, is that making the morally complex version of this mad scientist story is outside of Del Toro's reach as a writer director in a way that it wouldn't be with other directors. So I'm thinking about something like
Just to close the circle, this is like the scientific method is generally attributed to like the 1620s. So this is past that. It's not quite as, but like obviously the most modern version is going to be later because of reasons.
Yeah.
But
I think I don't know. I don't know the point I was really going to make here. Basically, just that complexifying the morals of these characters up is Del Toro doing himself a disservice versus. It reminds me a little bit of Christopher. Interstellar? Do you remember? Did you ever see that movie Interstellar?
I have not.
Okay, Interstellar was a movie by Christopher Nolan where the final act basically essentially said that love transcends scientific reality, right?
Right.
And that it was this dad's love that allowed him to connect to his daughter across the universe so that she could pull him out of a black hole. She does. And they have a happily ever after ending, though it is time dilated and all of this other kind of stuff. The thing that doesn't work about that movie, which is a movie that I like and has a lot of cool stuff in it and great moments and a lot of whatever, is that Christopher Nolan is fundamentally a sort of rational being rather than an empathetic one. He is just not good at transmitting a character's sort of not even romantic in like a people are going to get together and smooch sense, but romantic in a like, wow, the world is beautiful and
The
love
power of
conquers
love
all
conquers
sense.
all. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. He will never be a director who could do. Steven Spielberg did that, and it was like his fucking second movie because that's essentially the end of God, what's the Aliens movie? I
E.T.
love this movie. No, fucking Close Encounters with the Third
Oh,
Kind.
okay, yeah.
Close Encounters with the Third Kind. E.T. is also quite a lot like this. Is where that sort of real love and the connection that happens between these different characters. And in Close Encounters, I mean, he leaves, right? Like, you know what I mean? Spielberg can knock that kind of story out of the park because he's fundamentally an empathetic guy, right? He is a director who communicates through sort of pathos, right? Um, in that same dimension, but now reoriented towards straightforward versus morally complex characters, I think Guillermo del Toro just doesn't really have the ability to show me the moral complexity of Victor Frankenstein in such a way that it creates a cohesive picture. And this is part of what we're chafing against. And to be clear, I also do want to say this is still a good movie. It's
Yeah.
actually a better movie than a bunch of like, I don't like Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak is this but worse, basically.
That is
There's a
almost
lot of
exactly
good
what Caroline said. So,
yeah.
so she wants to watch
The
Crimson
thing
Peak
that
at
makes
some point.
there are a lot of things that work about Frankenstein that we haven't talked about, right? Like the set design, right? Like the it has a really great sense of geography, which I really love, and the camera is incredibly effective at setting it up. The way the tower that serves as the laboratory is shown to you in such a way that when you spend the next 20 minutes there over the course of a number of scenes, including the and attempted death of the fucking creature, you get every single second of it. The sluice out to the ocean that the creature uses to save itself, right? The individual things that he's climbing to put the big silver conductors up or whatever, right? Like all that stuff I think is excellent. And there's a lot that's excellent about Elordi's performance as the creature, which is, I don't know, even kind of like hard to describe. The only person I really didn't like in this movie, kind of actually thought, and this is maybe also where like the movie sort of falls apart a little bit. I kind of felt like she was sort of a chalkboard and didn't really have any.
Elizabeth is who you're talking about?
Elizabeth,
Yeah, you
yeah.
cut up yeah, it felt like she showed up to be like, well, actually, men are terrible and they send poor people off to die. And I was like, oh, thank you, right? Like, thank you for saying that, Mia Goth. That was very insightful, right? Like,
the thing that she sort of misses is like, and I don't know why this is. Caroline will appreciate this reference. It is like Keira Knightley in Pride and Prejudice. There's that Pride and Prejudice from the early 2000s that nobody likes, but
what do you
Keira
mean
Knightley
nobody
actually
likes?
does.
Everybody likes that movie. Like,
Does everybody like that one?
I feel like they do. I like it. I like it quite a bit.
I also like it. I don't know. I feel like I don't know.
I feel like it was
maybe I will.
I feel like it was a pop. I think it's one of those. My understanding is that it was relatively popular, but my read on it is maybe it was popular among people who had read Pride and Prejudice, right? Like if you go into like if you go into it without knowing everything that's happening, right? Like without knowing the story already, it might be a little bit confusing. And I got around that by being like, person who loves this movie and has watched it several times and read the book, explain this piece of esoterica that I don't quite understand, right? Like understanding that Mr. Collins is fucking weird and odd, right? Like it's like I'm watching it, I'm like, he said something about like potatoes, I guess, right? Like but like I get from the mood that it's supposed to be like that he's supposed to be kind of like a dullard, but like it's not clear from someone who speaks modern English that that's the case, right? Like
Okay, well, so to be fair, I haven't watched this movie in a long time. I did like it when I saw it, which was around when it came out. I want to say like what it was 2004, 2005, something like that. And a lot of what I liked about it is Keira Knightley was quite good,
Yeah.
right? I didn't quite recognize that at the time. I probably just thought that she was hot or whatever. But like she brings the kind of sort of like determined empathy, maybe is the word I'm going for here, that Mia Goth really lacks here.
Yeah, I would say she emotes really well in a way that like transcends the fact that she's speaking this kind of like not quite modern English, and so maybe you don't follow it exactly, but you understand what she means because she is like speaking with her face and her and her tone and her emotions, right?
Yeah, I mean the real thing that I want to find is like there's kind of this character archetype for like a female character who just has boundless love for just every little creature in the world. And I can see the archetype for who this character is, but I can't think of like a actress that I could compare her to. And so even though I wouldn't say that is the Elizabeth from that Pride and Prejudice, this Keira Knightley's Elizabeth from that Pride and Prejudice, her ability to act in a period appropriate drama at the exact is kind of close enough to sort of my meaning. My other thought here is Kate Winslet in Titanic, because of fucking course it is, right? But it's this feeling of like there is a person who is constrained by the structures of their society or whatever, but she has sort of like a depth of emotion and love that she extends even to this horrible creature, right? Like it's kind of what you're going for, and Mia Goth just didn't really give a whereas, Oscar Isaac, I think, did a fantastic job with Victor, even though maybe I'm kind of arguing he did too good a job because he got me a little too much on Victor's side. And then Elordi, I think, also just did a fantastic job as the monster because, I don't know, it's fucking Guillermo del Toro, man. He's going to do these fucking monster things really well. And also, it is also is about like his movement, the way that he kind of he almost does this like contortionist thing right in the beginning that's exquisite. I don't know, it's tough to explain, but yeah.
No. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. No, I like. I think it's a movie worth watching, right? Like, we're talking about these kind of like weird nitpicks, but it's it is a fine movie. I think I liked it better than say Nosferatu, which is the comparison I made at kind of the beginning of the conversation, um, which only is only a comparison point because it's another retelling of a monster book. But like it's I think it's probably the best one to make other than other Guillermo del Toro movies, right? Like, can you think of something else to compare like the other Frankenstein? Like, I don't know. I feel like I haven't actually seen the only other Frankenstein adaptation I've seen. I think is Young Frankenstein, which is a whole other ball of wax, right?
I've seen a bunch of them. So I've seen the Kenneth Branagh version, which I don't remember very well at all, but Robert De Niro looks fucked up in it. I have seen the original Frankenstein, so the one with Boris Karloff in the 30s. Maybe it was the 40s, like the original sort of Universal monster one. This is where Igor comes from and all that stuff. I actually kind of think that's a better story. I feel like Victor is more fucked up in that story, and because it's a horror movie, it just plays in sort of a better way, and the hubris and the tragedy of it plays in a way that makes the modern Prometheus feel kind of like a more apt title. There's a it removes the whole philosophical debate, because in that movie, Victor, and to be clear, it's not a better movie, right? It's from the 30s. The movie was kind of dog shit, right? But it does a bunch of things that clarify who the bad guy is, and the bad guy is Victor, right? When Victor is cast out and has to put together his sort of experiment, he just starts pulling, he becomes a grave robber, right? Which is an awful, like a terrible thing to do, and the movie dwells on that, right? But like this doesn't do any of that kind of at all. I mean, he's like picking over the corpses of these soldiers or whatever, and I guess that's bad, but
it's not.
even at the gallows, it's like it's seen as like rote almost.
Yeah,
Nobody gives him any pushback. Nobody makes him do it in the darkness. He doesn't have to, he doesn't have to contract this sort of horribly disabled, Igor, who is like that because he survived getting hanged. Like none of that kind of dark stuff is in there. To uncomplicate sort of the morality at play.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there's like and maybe this is part of the mixed message of the film. Like, there's definitely an aspect here of kind of like the coldness of the world, right? Like the terribleness of existence, right? And basically like Elizabeth's character is supposed to be like the one who cares, like even about the smallest insects, right? Like, um, and whereas the rest of the world is kind of like dank and dreary and it's like uncaring.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even that I think it's a mixed message, really. It's a sort of an unearned
No,
message, right? Like the message is actually extremely unmixed because I can point exactly what it is. In the framing device, which is the Arctic ship or whatever, it starts with the guys going, Captain, they say we should go back to St. Petersburg. And the captain goes, those fools will do what I say. We're going to press on. And then Victor tells his story. And at the very end of the movie, what does the captain do? We're going back to St. Petersburg, lads. And it's like, okay, clearly this is the movie's message in a metaphor, right? There are times where you just don't want to go any, you turn back. You stop. You go no further, kind of thing. That's what Victor ought to have done. That's the moral of Victor's Victor's sort of like story. And that's what I mean when I say I don't think it's that that clear moral vision is unearned is really my core.
Yeah, sorry, mixed message was the wrong thing to say. It's like mixed in this, not mixed in that it is unclear what the moral message is. Is that there are multiple moral messages happening, right? Like there are multiple.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. But I do also want to say that the movie is good, and I'm shitting on.
Yeah,
but
yeah, I do think a lot of there's like my biggest problems with the movie, like as a narrative, are the fact that things just kind of happen because like it feels like the plot, like the need to get to the next piece of the plot drives how things happen rather than the actions of the character. Like like his like Victor's character development feels entirely unearned to me, and it feels like he repents and begs the monster for forgiveness because this is the part of the movie where Victor realizes the error of his ways and asks the movie for forgiveness, not because he has done things that make it such that he has learned his lesson, right? Like,
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. It also, there's like there's a number of sort of like acts of God that create plot momentum, which are typically, I would say, like bad storytelling. If you were to show me like a script of this, I would highlight bad storytelling. So a good example of this would be the wolves, right? Like the fact that Victor's conflict with the family at the farm where he's hanging out at is sort of like dictated around these extremely aggressive wolves,
that's not Victor,
rather
it's the
than,
monster.
oh, I'm sorry, yeah, you're right, the monster, I'm talking about the monster. Like that is a you know, that's kind of this force of nature that's like putting pressure on Victor and the family, but like you can see a different version of the movie where they do the thing that, I mean, I don't know, maybe they're just not being cliche, because the real thing is that the family who the monster has been learning from this entire time, right, turns on him in a way that doesn't include all of this kind of contrivance around the fucking wolves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, yeah, it's there's that. There's what was the other thing? I was sorry. I had to ban a message in the chat. I lost my train of thought. Um, there, like, I believe in the book, and I only know this because I heard someone talk about it. Is the captain encounters Victor as he's like riding out on the snow, and like the fact that like when we go into the movie, the captain on the ship hears the explosion, which we later learn is Victor dynamiting the monster, right? Like the fact that like that's the last thing that happened, just kind of like it's like up until that moment he is still hell bent on killing the monster, right? Like there's he is very evidently has no change of heart, and obviously the amount of time that we spend in that story is is longer, is like 2 hours, right? Because it happens over that's the way the story is told. But the character himself is like tries to dynamite Victor Frankenstein, spends like what, like a day, maybe two, on the boat, and then the monster shows up again. And he's like, oh shit, my bad, right? Like there's nothing to like, and we get the sense that maybe he's started to repent at like that he's already repented once he's on the ship, but like there's like no connective tissue there at all, right? Like how do you go from like dynamiting the monster to like that without any sort of anything happening with Victor, right? Like like
Yeah.
you could maybe even do it with like a a moment of like oh God, what have I done, or something like that, right? I don't know.
This also happens in reverse for the monster. So, for instance, when the monster is sort of born, and the monster through Elizabeth's eyes is a sort of like primevally kind of like innocent being or whatever, but we have already watched the monster brutally murder a dozen of these Russian soldiers or whatever, right? And then the end of the movie is that actually the monster's okay. Like the captain is there. The monster has killed a dozen of his men, right? But the monster is actually fine. That was really his fault. They started it. You know what I mean? But it's like, okay, well, Victor's on the hook for sort of the implied moral failing, accidental death of Elizabeth, but the monster isn't on the hook for the very obvious murders that he
Yeah.
just committed in front of these people a day ago. But actually, you know what? It's fair. It's like this is like it's all wrapped into one.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like you kind of want the soldiers to like Wilhelm scream as he tosses them off the boat, because like it would give them that level of like stormtrooper, like they don't actually matter because they're like
Or like I don't know that it's the movie spends a lot of time watching the monster graphically murder these guys,
yeah,
right? In a version where like it's playing out in the distance, and you're watching these soldiers run, and they turn and they fire, but there's snow. You can't quite see what's happening or whatever. Does he kill? It's so much less clear. We watch him punch a guy in the face so fucking hard that his back snaps. Like, come on.
Yeah, or like he just kind of like wings them out of the way, and like they accidentally die, right? Like kind of like what happened to Victor's brother, right? We can't remember the name of now.
Franklin or no Franklin.
Frankenstein. That's you
No, shit, what was it? It's pretty embarrassing. Edward. It's my next guess. Edward Frankenstein. Nope. William. It's fucking William. Franklin Frankenstein is actually good. I'm glad that you caught that so immediately. That's actually pretty amazing to have just immediately caught that. You think they would name him Franklin Frankenstein? Anyway, yeah, good movie. I guess. I guess I will say that the fact that we can sit here and sort of dig into the moral fiber at the heart of the movie is actually kind of something in its favor. This is part of what I mean when I say I like it better. This makes it sort of seem.
It does make me want to go read Frankenstein just so I can know like what's happening. Yeah. Yeah, that's our hour mark. It's been 2 weeks. We have set and started our next D&D campaign, Rats in the Walls. Yeah. How do you feel about that? Do you want to go over your choice?
Yeah. So we did this little thing. So for those of the audience who maybe are not up on the incredibly esoteric politics of our internal D&D games, right? D&D happens in this world, Saran. We obviously done about a bunch of podcast episodes about those pitches and stuff like that. Right now there were 23 at the time of choosing. 23 total pitches, right? And what I wanted to do was to kind of create a little bit of an activity for session 0, because I know that I need to work on the campaign before we start it. So I was about a month out, 6 weeks out from when the campaign will truly start. We'll get together and we'll pick it, and then I will put together what the actual sort of like campaign looks like in the intervening time, and we will kind of like get to the other side of it. And I wanted to create I thought of myself as like an teacher, like we just always used to have fun little games that we play around these kind of things, like these activities that gave chance or a voice to do stuff or whatever, like how you pick between dodgeball and kickball in gym class or something like that. You might do some like rudimentary little thing. That's kind of what and so the thing that I came up with was writing all of the pitches on the whiteboard and then giving everybody a bunch of magnets, right? The magnets represent votes, so they can vote for as many, they can vote for the things. They can only vote once. And then it followed this process of you put up everybody's votes. There were 6 of us. We each had 5 votes for a total of 30 magnets on the board. Then we pull 2 magnets each off, right? Which reduces it down to 20, right? Then you put 5 more magnets back on the board. 5, pull 2 off, down to 15. Up to 20. And so you go back and forth until and then specifically when a pitch loses all of its votes, it gets erased and you can't vote. Which was something that I had theorized when I put this together, but in the moment I really didn't pitches. And we followed that whole process to its completion and ended up with Rats in the Walls, which was actually kind of a favorite from the first round of voting when we did Heretic Heroes last year. It's one that I think everybody really enjoys the feel and the sound of Rats in the Walls, so I'm not surprised that it won. But it definitely was not like Kovolgrad or Liberation in the Heathlands or like Ripples in the Sand. There were a couple of these that were those I would have probably say were more favorites to continue on the story from point A to point B.
Yeah, I think it has this interesting effect of like, I feel like no one had to play anything they really didn't want to play, right? Which is, I think, maybe the more important goal, right? Is making sure that no one is like actually like I don't want to do this particular one, right? Like because when you vote up, like there's no expression of, you know, oh actually I hate this one in particular. And there's kind of enough repetition that it, like, you know, if you're dedicated, you can stop a particular a game from happening. And I think that's actually the valuable part, right? Because I don't think if Rats in the Walls was anybody's first choice, that's just kind of because it happened to be, right? Like that's by coincidence. But it did a good job of selecting four things that were sorry. Good job at selecting against things that people hated, which I think is good.
Yeah.
So I've got a really persnickety nit to pick with you.
Cool. Pick it. Let's go.
One of the groups in this city. What was the name of the city again?
Kashek.
Kashek. There's a monastery. What is the name of the monastery?
Oh God, I don't remember.
No, the important part is that it's a monastery. I believe
it's a Kaj monastery. Yeah.
You described it as just being a place for like monks train, right? Is it like a monastery to the god that I cannot remember the name of?
Zakesh?
Zakesh, yeah. Is it a monastery to Zakesh?
Not really.
Is it religious at all?
It is religious in the sense of like the furtherance of one's, there would definitely be a spiritual element in the sense. So okay, I want to back this up. In 7th Expedition, friend of the podcast, Lou, plays a dragonborn monk, and as part of her backstory, I canonized the existence of dragonborn monasteries, right? Which is essentially where dragonborn, very martial culture. And when you have reached the apex of your combat prowess as a legionnaire or as a seneschal or whatever else, right? The place that you go to realize the actual apex of your martial ability, your own mastery of your own body, is actually to one of the monasteries that are up in the mountains. And Kotchek has one of these monasteries. So there is a spiritual element in the sense that it is about, one's sort of mastery of their own kind of like perfect form, but there isn't a religious element in the sense that it doesn't tie into any of the gods or divine magic or it's more about like, I don't even know, like Zen Buddhist monks than like
I think
this is your persnickety point that
it should be like
monasteries
a dojo.
have to be religious.
Well, this is I think an issue with kind of the way that D&D, like we've had these conversations that like D&D isn't really polytheistic. It's like, it's like multi-monotheistic in a way that's like kind of strange, right? In the same way that like the kind of inspiration for these for D&D monks is kind of like Shaolin or Buddhist monks of, Buddhist martial monks of various distinction, but these are all kind of expressing a level of religious dedication. It's just that the form of Eastern religion looks a lot different than the form of Western religion, right? And a lot of D&D deities take the form of Western religion. There's not as much like, it's usually kind of like in a side source book, but like, people like the nature of kind of divine magic makes the kind of religious system that like Zen embodies kind of like, it doesn't mesh perfectly well.
Yeah, so like reincarnation or whatever is like a fundamentally religious thing that is understood as a one-to-one religious, like religious concept in the East to religious concepts in the West. But when you're in D&D and you have specifically divine magic, right? What you do is you say, oh, well, all of the Western stuff, that's divine magic, that's religion. But the monks in this monastery, they are irreligious because their religion doesn't look like Western religion.
Yeah, something like that. Because like the thing you were describing to me sounds more like a dojo than it does like a monastery, right? And this is kind of why, again, this is very persnickety, but this is why I have like I balked it because you called it a monastery. I'm like, where's are they like an order of Zakesh worshiping, right? Like martial artist. Yeah, no, and
Yeah, in a certain sense, I don't know why. I don't know why I called it a monastery. I
well,
think of
because
monasteries
that
as
is
a
what you would
place where
call
monks train.
like you would call like a Shaolin temple a monastery, right?
Right.
Where like the real world equivalent of this would be called a monastery. It just would have this like Buddhist Zen flavor, like religious flavor to it. And honestly, this is very small, but it's been like stuck in my mind for for a week now. So I figured
I think it's fair. I think it is fair enough to sort of point it out. I can't I you know, it's the kind of thing where like I can't dodge criticism like that because I'm such a piece of shit about like there's no such thing as an inscriptionist. It is a scribe. Right? Like if I'm gonna be that, or it's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's not chomping at the bit, it's champing at the bit, actually. Like if I'm gonna be that guy, I have to take stuff like this on the chins. All I can really say is fair enough. I think you're right.
no, and I just thought the interesting point here is just kind of exploring how like why that divergence happens, right? Like that like D&D doesn't actually handle like the Eastern kind of religious concept super, or rather, I guess it's just I think it actually doesn't do a terrible job of like getting at kind of like the power fantasy there, um, but it just kind of like doesn't marry it well to the existing divine magic structure, right? And I don't think I've ever seen a system or a pre-built world do it well. I'm like marry the two, right? Because like I have played several wuxia systems that handles it well, but there's no like Western equivalent divine magic to deal with. Like maybe one of the World of Dark, like there's a thing pinging in the back of my mind that like there's like a World of Darkness game that handles it well, but that's because the religious stuff is a little bit more abstracted out, right? Like,
Yeah, I tend to think that only really like something like D&D or Pathfinder could even come close to this because those games are the kind of kitchen sink
yeah,
games.
yeah, that makes sense.
And you don't have the two of these things existing inside of this universe unless you're playing one or the other, basically,
Yeah,
right? Like if I'm playing Seventh Sea, which is a pretty, a pretty clean one-to-one of sort of the real world, right? You have a bunch of sort of nations and concepts that are basically just, oh, this is the Spanish Empire, oh, this is the English Empire, oh, this is France, this is the Catholic Church, this is whatever, right? Kind of thing. I there are Eastern elements there, and maybe it kind of like approaches it or whatever. But you just don't have the same sort of crossover that D&D and Pathfinder have because they have cleric and monk in their core 11
yeah,
base classes, right?
yeah. No, I mean honestly, this comes about because like Gary Gygax thought wuxia was cool, right, and put it in his like Knights and Wizards game, right? Like,
Yeah. I also think it's cool. I'm a huge fan of sort of the dynamic of kind of I mean, I've sort of typified it with the power, the power stuff where you have Drew. I mean, I guess also Pathfinder does this, right? Because you have primal divine, occult, and
arcane.
arcane magics, right? But I think that's like a great way to kind of handle some of this stuff. Maybe the hardest version of this is maybe in something like WoW. WoW also has the sort of D&D roots that combine monks and sort of clerics and paladins. But they come at it from a different angle of you can kind of be religious about any of these power sources, right? Like the religion of the um night elves is nature magic druidic shit, and the religion of the humans is conventional Western religion light shit, right? And it just so happens that worshiping light, worshiping death, worshiping nature, worshiping fucking monks who are technically like not even one of those quarters, but actually from the space in between them, which are the elements. Like, I don't know, make it make sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think WoW gets away with it by like kind of giving more like by basically not being super faithful to like the Eastern precepts, right? Like it's kind of like make these totemic spirit animals real across both druidic and monastic or magic, right? Like, um, and that's not super in tune with like what like real Buddhism looks like. But in the same token, like the light is obvious is kind of like a it's like a pastiche of Christianity, but like it isn't really, right? Like it's like the form without kind of like the actual kind of prescriptivist backing, right? Like there is no Jesus in World of Warcraft besides Thrall, right? Like but it's not
Yeah,
it's
I think that's true. And this
yeah
is someone, and obviously I deeply love Warcraft. I think Warcraft, of all of the super long running lore dense universes that kind of exist in our modern world, Warcraft is the best of them, maybe. It is, if I were to make a tier list, you would have like Warcraft, Warhammer. I want to say Star Wars, but like, really, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah
and the heroic effort of Chronicle, right? This lore Bible that puts together all and ties in all these narrative strands from all over the Warcraft universe and links them into one kind of central understandable dogma of, oh, there's 6 different powers, order, disorder, light, void, life, death, right? That stuff is that, like, I have a tremendous amount of respect for it. Like, this is the Chris Metzen, World Soul Saga love in the chat. And I just don't think any other of these huge gigantic universes that have novels and games and all these other kind of like spin-offs come all that close. Basically all of them have hit Mango's Iron Law of world building
yeah
before WoW did.
yeah no and it's interesting that like wow that I think part of it is that like no one asks super like the characters don't ask like weird super hard questions of themselves in a way like you know all of the power are like real things, right? Like the light is kind of like this real manifest thing that is like also like there's the Naru, there are these like kind of like physical manifestations of it, right? And it's not like um and it's not perfect, right? Like famously, the light isn't always great, right? Like um but no one ever goes to the paladins and is like, so how about that fucked up shit, right? Like it's kind of like you know
Listen, read the new book. Blood Ties has a lot to do with fucked up light shit, apparently.
right, but like no one goes to the paladins and says, why are you praying in this church, right? Like it
Right.
doesn't quite make sense, right? Like if you really thought about it, they're just kind of like, okay, whatever, right? Like um and I it's almost like a suspension of disbelief type thing, and I think that's why it works is because like no one wants like it's not so bad that like you as like a player are forced to confront it. Like it's not like you walk to a church and be like, this doesn't make any sense, right? But like it's also like no one's also trying to point it out, right? So I think that's why it ultimately works. Is like if you thought about it too hard and if they leaned into it too hard, it actually would be stupid. But like why you don't need to do that, right? Like you could just appreciate the superstructure, right? And it works on that level.
Yeah, in a certain sense, I mean, you and I have had these kinds of conversations nature of sort of faith or whatever. In a certain sense, you never can even capture that in fantasy because gods are real and exist and
Yeah.
have
Well,
demonstrable power, right?
yeah, you can capture it in fantasy in some like there are ways to do it, but like not in most modern incantations, right? Like you can like mess around with like yeah, maybe divine magic isn't actually a conduit to like maybe there's something there, but like or like having the gods not be present or whatever. But it's it's a tough thing to do. But yeah, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, it's interesting also because I think in a certain sense I like playing with it in I don't know. I had just I remember playing like Forgotten Realms games and like reading the Forgotten Realms like books, which I didn't read very. I maybe read like 2 or 3 of them in the library. They weren't even Driz Jordan books, right? Or maybe they were. I don't remember, kind of thing. And I remember just like not loving how sort of god strewn that stuff is. Also, Skyrim is like this. The Daedra are kind of all Skyrim and manifest ways, which is not something that I've ever loved. And so this is why in Saran the gods are so far away. They act through these prophets, right? All of the rest of it. And then they also like blend different elements. This is something I was having a conversation with Rachel about, because in her game, The Shattered Forge, I'm playing a warlock. The warlock is Gondor, who's made a pact for power with a Zakeshi devil, right? So a devil of the fire god, right? And one of the things that she did is she gave an um because Gondor is my WoW warlock who summons demons, right? She gave me essentially an artifact using the rules that I talked about on this podcast a long time ago that summons these different Zakeshi devils, and they're all little fucked up guys, right? One of them is essentially like a little fell hellhound, right? Another one of them is like this kind of being of nails that can like embed itself in something. It's kind of like a skittering spider made out of nails that you can command to like grasp onto things. And then another one is just kind of like a WoW Felguard or something, right? And I had told her that that she was like, does this comport with sort of the lore? And I said, well, kind of everything does, because the gods can manifest both sort of devils and angels, right? Like if there are Zakeshi angels who have flaming swords and wings of fire in a like magic card kind of sense of the word angel, because they are gods. They are kind of so powerful that as long as it is within their domain, in this case fire, right, like they can express and they can kind of empower these sort of like lesser outsiders in order to do stuff, basically. And I just think that like that's not something I've really run into in too many other you know too many other worlds that we play D&D games in.
Yeah, Forgotten Realms and in Galarian, right? Like angels are like lawful good, although that's not, Pathfinder doesn't have those concepts quite anymore. But they've got like a set association with I think it's Surrender.
Yeah, like devils were lawful evil, demons are chaotic evil, which I actually like quite a lot. I think that that's like a good conception. Daemons, the DAE, daemons are neutral evil, and the neutral evils are described by the four horsemen of the apocalypse. That stuff is clever as fuck. I think that shit is great, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What else has been going on with your week?
I've been playing a lot of Total War Warhammer 3 because there's a new DLC coming out. It is coming out on December 4th, when they're doing a big Total War 25 years. They're doing a big like show. Everyone expects them to announce Total War Warhammer 40K, which would be nuts. But everybody thinks they're gonna announce Total War Warhammer 40K, and then probably some version of Total War Empire, or maybe Total War Medieval. There have been a number of leaks that say something along the lines of Total War, like World Wars 1 and 2, which I think are truly bonkers, and I would be deeply surprised. But hey, the understanding, the idea is that if you can do Total War 40K, you can probably pull off some level of Total War Warhammer, or I'm sorry, Total War World War 1, World War 2, because you're kind of like, I don't know, adopting into sort of mechanized infantry warfare sort of things.
Yeah, I guess the scale there is the issue, which I think with 40K you can kind of like cheat around a little bit, but like you have to kind of like do this like, and actually there's like 4 billion chips, right, type thing.
Yeah, this is typically is how we would describe it in actual sort of like 40K sort of terms. I have Angron that you printed for me in the other room. Angron is the demon prince who is in command of the World Chaos Legion. When Angron shows up in my army list, and I play him as part of a battle, the idea is that we're kind of zooming in onto the part of the battle where Angron and Rabute Gilliman are going to go toe to toe and kick each other's asses or something, right? But that represents a conquest of a world that includes a bazillion, like a bazillion people.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I feel like The problem there is less like the technical implementation and more kind of like the game feel. Right? Like I think you can get away with 40K being like, oh yeah, that that's what this is, and kind of hand wave it. World War One and World War Two is going to feel a little bit weirder to do it that way. Like with if you go onto the battlefield with like 42 soldiers and like that's supposed to be like how do you do like D-Day in Total War in the Total
Yeah, how
War
do you do Stalingrad,
engine?
right?
Yeah, exactly.
185,000 Nazi, soldiers fighting in block by block combat, right? Like, are you going to is the idea that we're just going to in that far and that will define it? Hearts of Iron does this because they extract away kind of all,
Yeah,
right?
there's
It
no
is
battle
all
map.
about exactly, it's all about pins on the map. But Total War, the whole conceit is how much fun it is to, take that big army that you're building and then go fight a tactical battle where, your whatever warbear riders charge into the enemy greenskin boys and clean up.
Yeah. This feels like they're gonna like call it an abstraction, and then like somebody's gonna create some like ridiculous mod where you can actually fight every battle 1-to-1, and like it takes someone 7 years to actually like roll out like the entire World War
There
II.
are some RTSs that are truly huge. Actually, there are like YouTube videos that I've watched. I can't remember what it's called, but it's some like indie kind of open source RTS. But what they'll do is you could do like huge, gigantic 50 on 50 battles, and it's like playing StarCraft but with 50 people on your team and 50 people on the enemy team, and the two of you guys are just getting together and kicking the shit out of each other.
Yeah, no, so that makes sense because you've got like essentially you're mirroring like real chain of command, right? Like there's somebody who's maybe calling like the shots at the top at like a top level, but like the actual implementation is down to like individual commanders rather than rather than one person. Uh, yeah,
Yep.
interesting. I've been playing a ton of Arc Raiders because
I played a little bit of Arc Raiders too. Not much. Just I've been doing a little bit of like quest completion just on my own because I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I've been playing also, I guess, a little bit of Legion. I kind of am just waiting a little bit. We're total. Weirdly, Europa Universalis has fallen off of my calendar. Europa Universalis has been fun, but I think I restarted Spain 3 times. I got to the point where I'm in a pretty good spot. I formed Spain, but I now understand so many aspects of the game that I just fucking wish I knew sooner. And it makes me want to start over for a 4th time. And the idea of getting rid of my like 15 hours of play on my current Spanish Empire run bothers me. Also, they completely fucked me on the patches. Is the other thing. They've been patching the game daily. This is the thing I have never quite so dramatically. They've been patching the game daily, and that includes patching out stuff that like we learned to do. So my Spain run, I went pretty hard for centralization, which, centralization and decentralization are like 2 different values you can push towards one or the other. Pushing towards centralization seemed good. It increases your crown power. All that stuff is kind of great. They dramatically rewrote kind of the fundamentals of crown power, or I'm sorry, of centralization, to also sort of fuck me, where if you're centralized, it has a really bad negative impact on your subjects, of which I have a couple. And if you're decentralized, you get bonuses with your subjects, of which again I have a couple. So now all of a sudden, kind of because I was playing to the 1.0 version of the game, I am now nerfed 1.0 version. And then the other thing that I did is I leaned hard into Levy, because I don't know, I wanted to do some pretty hardcore conquests right up front because I wanted to form Spain as quickly as, which I did. But Levy's got giga nerfed, and like literally like gigantic stacks of 30,000 levies were getting cleaned up by like 800 regular troops, and I was like, fuck. So not great, not my favorite, but what are
yeah,
you gonna do?
interesting. I I feel like this is why I like Crusader Kings better in general, is because stuff like this like even like, there's not really a point in starting over because like you might just get fucked by the dice anyway. Like in a way that I don't think happens in EU4 or EU5 as much, or in any of the EUs as much. Like Crusader Kings is kind of like, yeah, maybe your primary heir gets killed because like a horse kicked him in the head, and you have to deal with your fail son for a while, and like you get like a nice narrative out of that. But you're always only a generation away from like having like a better leg up. Um, but EU5 seems like it's much more like a cohesive front to back thing.
Yeah, I also think it's more complicated because of the nature of kind of like the content creator sphere. Basically, the game is so fucking complicated that I have to watch hours and hours and hours of YouTube so that some fucking, British guy in his basement can explain to me how markets work, right? So I'm watching these guys play and they are instilling in me a number of what's good, what's bad. They're helping me parse all of this kind of stuff, right? But the fact that they're helping me and thousands, millions of other players parse all of this kind of stuff is what creates the metas that now Paradox is patching out of the game. Right? Like it's not like it's not like I learned that centralization was good irrespective of whatever. There's plenty of stuff like that I have learned, right? When it comes to like colonization or how I want to like build up my empire or whatever else. But centralization was something I clearly learned because I was watching people play the game and they all said centralization is better than decentralization. Push for centralization as quickly as possible. And I was like, okay, cool, that makes a lot of sense, right? And now that centralization gets super fucking nerfed and like pulls a fucking, steamroller over my playthrough, right? I'm being punished because the game was too complicated to understand. I went to a third party group to help me understand it. The third party group creates a metagame. Paradox nerfs the metagame, and that feels awful. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Like it feels like it makes sense to me, right? Like they probably want decentralization for centralization to be a choice rather than a kind of like, one is strictly better than the other thing. So I get why they change it up like that, but it also must be frustrating to kind of like load into a game. It's like, oh, well, I'm fucked because these penalties, now have put my board state in an unrecoverable position. Yeah.
yeah, but whatever.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to be butthurt about it.
That was kind of my sense of this, though, is that like maybe I should give it a little while to kind of like let the bumps be ironed out. But
Yeah, I
see.
mean, typically this is also what fucked me in with EU4. Spent all that time learning how trade works because I was playing Spain again, and I was doing a lot of colonization, and I would colonize the world, and then I needed to understand how trade worked in order to you have to get how trade works in order to make colonization worth it, basically, right? And then they completely rewrote the whole system in one of their expansions out from under me, and I was like, system. Um, it's complicated because I have relearned Dolores a number of times, and every time I basically have thought, good, I'm happy. I've relearned Warhammer factions without too much trouble, right? One of the playthroughs that I'm doing right now is Kislev, and Kislev is so insanely different than launch Kislev was, but it's so much more fun. I love this Kislev. It's incredible, right? Even though I did go down for alliances and all of the other, like the Empire and the fucking Bretonians have all fucked me because they're all dead. And I don't know why this is quite as annoying as maybe just because EU takes so insanely long. I have started 20 times the number of Total War Warhammer campaigns that I've ever started EU 4 or 5 runs. I've maybe only completed two or three EU. One as Spain, my very first one. I did another one as Burgundy, which was like me taking over France and just kind of seeing if I could fight back against France. And then I did a third one as Brandenburg, where I formed Prussia and then Germany and tried to take over. Anyway, I don't know. There we
Yeah,
are.
no. My guess is that part of this is that like you were, like you said, you learned this trade system and then it changed out from under you like immediately. I bet you if you had like learned the trade system 6 months before they released the expansion, you wouldn't have felt as kind of burned by it because you wouldn't have just finished learning it, right? Like,
Yeah, I definitely think that's true, and
and
that's fair.
you're getting the same thing here because like this is like early in the life cycle hot fixes almost rather than considered like in 6 months the game will probably be stable enough to learn so that another 6 months when they change something because they released an expansion it won't feel as bad.
Yeah, I mean, a great example of this is in these same patches that fucked me, they also revamped the trade system because basically players were kind of cheesing it in a way. Basically, players could realize that they could import something from a cheap market and then export it to another market at just insane rates, right? Like you could get huge money by importing gold from Mali and then selling it to fucking, Amsterdam or something like that. Which I will emphasize is the point of trade, right?
Yeah, that's like garbage. It's classic arbitrage.
Exactly. I did not. The trade I have found to be kind of impenetrable. All I really understand about trade is that I get a cut of it if I own the trade center, and and that cut is determined by my crown power and capacity. So I go, oh, I need marketplaces to increase capacity. I guess I'm building a fucking marketplace everywhere in goddamn Spain, right? Um, they changed that system where you could like snipe these amazing trains and turn them into 1000x crazy multiplier t- gold, not sinks. What's the opposite of a sink? Like breaking the piggy bank open or something like that.
Fountain.
But yeah, but because
source
I never
is the correct term, right? Like it would be
yeah, because I never understood how to make it's almost like an exploit, right? Like this gold source exploit work. The fact that they changed it meant, oh, I automated all of my trade, so
yeah.
I just don't care. Like it didn't affect me at all.
You know, do you know how they fixed that, right? Because like presumably what it's not doing is capturing some sort of like transaction cost, right? Like that would make it hard to do at that scale, like in the real world.
I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know.
that's fine. Whatever. That is totally fine. But do you have anything else you want to talk about? Oh, you know what? I had one more thing that I wanted to shout out, which is I finished the newest Defunct Land video on animatronics. It is he had released one like 3 to 6 months ago, which is part one, which is like up until like I want to say like the 60s or the 80s or something, and the second one is like the modern age of Disney living characters, and it's great. I've never cared so much about like theme park, living characters.
I crashed out at about 30 minutes. I just couldn't care enough, which I think is maybe just like I was in a bad mood or something.
I get that. If you don't find the base subject matter interesting at all, like I get it. But like part of it for me is I just find like the technology interesting. Another part of it is he is so good at deadpan humor. He is so perfect at it. Like there's a line that's something like it's somebody makes a statue of Walt Disney, and Walt Disney reportedly says Walt. I'm gonna try to do my best to like do the funk name. Walt reportedly said, "What am I going to do with this? Statues are for dead people." Next line, completely deadpan. Walt soon became a dead person, and like just like it was just like perfect. He's like perfect at this deadpan humor, and it works so well. And and just like the cuts he does is just it is a joy to watch on that aspect. The kind of like grand point he makes at the end is kind of like okay, whatever. Like which is kind of like about people in the mix or whatever, which is it's still good. It's just kind of like that's not the point. The point is the journey, right? Like learning about all these different things, right? Like it is neat that there was like a booth that you could go and talk to an animated Stitch, and somebody behind the curtain would tell you things. And then he explains like the reason like they prototype this with Mickey, but you can't do anything with fucking Mickey because he is too important to the brand, right? Mickey has to be perfect. Stitch, 1 is new, 2 is kind of like a rude asshole, and 3 is energetic, right? So like if he's kind of brusque, it's fine. If he glitches out, that's just like Stitch being Stitch, right? Like, and just explaining all of this, I just find endlessly fascinating. And like I said, it doesn't hurt that the guy's great with jokes. So
Yeah, I mean, I got so into that Fast Pass video that I'm
yeah,
sure if somebody can convince me that Fast Pass is interesting, I'm sure you can convince me that animatronics are interesting. I just, for some reason, I just like couldn't crack the nut. I watched. I mean, I watched a bunch of stuff. I watched Stranger Things season 5, part 1 or something. Dropped earlier this week, I think on Wednesday or something. So I watched the first half of that, which is pretty bad, to be honest. It's okay. Stranger Things definitely jumped its own shark. It's Demogorgon face shark. It jumped pretty emphatically. And then I've been playing, a bunch more Rachel. Factorio is just like the anchor in my existence. Okay. Um until Rats in the Wall starts, and then that could be
yeah. Let's say if we're gonna fully round it out, we watched the 2 episodes of Holiday Bake Off, which were fine. Um, I will like so there's always a celebrity one, and always they call back a bunch of of the old competitors, and the celebrity ones are always kind of bad, because like no one expects them to be very good at anything. The one I enjoyed the most was like a couple of years ago. They did basically the cast of Dairy Girls, which was a show that I also enjoyed. It's also on Netflix. Um, but the returning competitors ones are always fun because they're like previous contestants that are like going for it again, right? And this one was like Scottish themed. It was because it's the New Year's one. It's Hogmanay, which I don't know anything about Scottish holidays, but every Paul Hollywood was in a kilt, and they made a bunch of interesting food. So that
I
was
should do a Scottish EU5 run. Those runs are always super fun, where like you play kind of the medium power underdog
mm,
who historically kind of loses. This is what made my Burgundy run. Burgundy is kind of like the eastern part of France, a little bit of Switzerland, a little bit of like Holland and stuff is in there. And playing Burgundy, who beats and takes over France rather than gets beaten and taken over, is like incredibly fun. So
I got that. Let's see. Oh, we've started season 2 of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which
hell yeah.
is neat. It is better than the first season so far.
Have you gotten to Fufu Cuddly Poops?
That's the saber tooth moose, right? Yeah.
When I was a kid, that episode was like we watched that. No, actually, we did watch that episode live. I watched that episode live, but this was before my friends got into it with The Secret of the Fire Nation. So halfway through the season,
Okay.
which I won't spoil anything from, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's obviously a kids show, but it's still fun. The thing the persnickety thing that keeps sticking out at me about this is like, all of the animals are like wolf bats or like duck turtles, right? And like that's neat, and it's a kids show. But the fact they're named wolf bats and duck turtles implies that there is a regular bat and a regular wolf and a regular duck and a regular turtle. But I haven't seen any normal animals, right? So, it's
True.
yeah.
It also brings up incredible conversations about their physiology and stuff is like, and I want to know the answers, but
Yeah.
how does a duck turtle work? Does it have feathers? Do they lay duck eggs or turtle eggs? Like those are the kinds of questions deeply
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. That feels like a kind of like, you're thinking too hard about this question, about this children's show about like, Aang, feeling a certain special way about Katara, right? In half the episodes, the other half of the episodes, he's like a weirdo child, but
Oh my god, have you seen Zuko Alone? It's
Um,
the episode after Fufu Cuddly Poops.
yeah, so I definitely this is the one where he like where he goes and hangs out with the Earth child. Like he
farmers.
fight. Yeah, yeah, yes, yeah. I have.
Yeah, and he has his swords. He has his
Yeah,
broadswords. God, I fucking love Zuko so much. Zuko is like the greatest character in, I don't
yeah.
know.
No, I mean like I like knew from kind of like ephemera, like not ephemera. That's the wrong word. From like kind of like the what is in the air about the culture that he does like a heel face turn, but like it's like pretty obvious from like minute one of season one that he's going to do a heel face turn, and that like I have also heard that Azula is a psychotic bitch, and like that is pretty apparent from like a moment one when you meet Azula that she is just like unambiguously the worst person besides maybe Ozai, right? Like, um,
I have a deep love for Azula as one of these. Azula, when I was complaining a little bit about sort of the construction of villains earlier, like Azula is a perfect, like, she is just a megalomaniacal narcissist, right? Like, it is not much more complicated than that. She inflicts cruelty and manipulates people to further her own aims because she's terrible. That's it. There's no, there's no rhyme or reason besides she's just that bad, right? Which I think is deeply compelling.
maybe like a year ago, I saw like a Twitter thread about like apparently there's a comic that like if you ever thought that Azula was redeemable, like the comic just like puts the nail in that coffin that she is just like the worst person. Um, so I might have to hunt that down after we finish the show, just because I'm curious about it. But um,
Do you have a favorite episode so far?
um, I don't know. Um, Iroh is definitely my favorite character.
It's gonna be, yeah. A lot of people would probably say that.
Yeah,
He is a very you kind of character. I feel like he has a mix of sort of like bumbling kind of humor thing, but like also,
like
these are the kinds of characters you always connect to.
yeah, he's like goofy, but he's like competent, right? Like he took a level of badass trope, right? He's not just like a joke character, right? But um,
Yeah, the first episode of Avatar I ever watched was the Blue Spirit from season 1. Remember that one?
yeah,
Where Zuko pretends to be the Blue Spirit or whatever. That was the first time I'd ever seen, and I just happened to watch it, and I thought it was, I didn't even, you don't even have the bat, like, that was the first episode, so I didn't know anything about any of this, right? But all I understood is that Zuko was the bad guy, but he was working against other bad guys to save the person that he was hunting, and just the drama of that is so delicious, that, and also the end is so great, when Aang says that thing of like, do you think that we could have been friends? And Zuko just shoots him with like a fire blast kind of thing. Ah, my teenage little heart can't deal with that level of angst. I was fucking hooked.
yeah. Zuko, the angstiest boy.
Yeah.
It's like standing. I think the last one we watched was Iroh teaches him the redirect lightning. Like,
Oh my god, through your stomach thing? Hell yeah, that
yeah,
shit's great.
yeah. But like the episode ends with him like standing on a mountain, screaming at the lightning to hit him because like you always fucking shit on me some more, effectively, right?
I
And like
know.
crying. It's
God,
like Jesus
that is
fucking Christ, Zuko.
oh, so good. It is so good. Ah, I love that fucking show. I should honestly rewatch it because
Hey, we could talk if you rewatch it while we do. You could we could talk about it as
we definitely should. We definitely should do an episode on this show.
yeah.
It is like one of my claims to fame. Every time anybody brings it up, I'm like, I thought it was before everybody else, okay? Like,
Did you watch Legend of Korra or whatever
I'm a Legend of Korra stan. I love Legend.
that is unsurprising to me.
What?
Um
Oh, why is that?
because I know it's controversial and every other thing that's like controversial like there are very
Like
few
Star Wars prequels, Matrix sequels, right? It falls into that category. All over,
even more than that, right? Like I feel like anything that's like divided, you will take the pro side of. Um
Interesting.
and that, I don't think you're doing this on purpose. I just think that that's like kind of your nature.
It is 1000% in the exact. I think that's absolutely accurate. It's 1000% in the The reason I like the Matrix sequels is because yes, the Matrix is amazing and the follow-ups are not as good, but they're still good, right? The prequels are the same thing, just like a bunch of these, right? The Hobbit movies would be a good example, right? Korra is that exact same thing. The first season is actually quite bad, but the second, third, and fourth season are all much better and just a lot of fun. They do sweet stuff, but Avatar: The Last Airbender is still deeply superior than
I have heard
Korra.
that like maybe in 26 or 27 they're coming out with like something about like another cycle where like the Avatar is like an Earthbender that's like a twin of that is a twin. I don't know if that's like I read that somewhere. I don't know how far along or how real that is, but um
The thing that's a little complicated is they are starting in this kind of like quasi medieval place, but Korra is in like the 1920s, right?
right,
Like
yeah.
there's electricity, there's cars and stuff like that. And this is a little bit of where its own ass that I'm sure most people would like end up sort of complaining about. The third season of Korra though is excellent. The third season of Korra might be better than any season in The Last Airbender, which would be like this would be like an insane. I'm sure if you were to ask anybody, most people say book 2 is the best of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I would agree. Book 2 is the best. I Season 3 of Korra is so good that maybe it's there. Maybe you could get me to agree that those two are like A tier.
Okay, interesting. Just because I also know that like the way Korra ends, like I don't totally understand the implications, but I've heard things that like the end of Korra is like the thing I have heard is that the end of Korra is like Korra is wrong actually, and I don't quite understand like it's something about the cycle that I don't fully understand yet because I haven't watched all of it. Um, and that this new third arc is going to deal with the implications of that, and that actually, in fact, Korra was like at least not totally right with what she did. But
Oh, interesting.
again, I'm saying
Yeah,
this not knowing exactly what the context is. So this is like
yeah,
me absorbing the discourse through Twitter, essentially.
I don't even really understand how true or untrue that comes down to. Korra is different. One of the things that Korra has kind of worked against it is that its arcs are much more self-contained. So the first arc of Avatar, you already understand the Fire Nation. I'm sorry, the Last Airbender. You already understand the nature of the Fire Nation, Ozai, all of that kind of stuff, right? And so there's no question about kind of like the overall trajectory of this 60 episodes of television, right? Korra does not have a very similar, right? Korra follows the same sort of characters, but it's much more than that in the sense of like each arc is its own kind of seasonal bad that's doing its own sort of seasonal kind of thing. And there's not that this like grand illuminating thing that they are building towards sort of in the same way. In fact, actually, when it comes to that kind of stuff, the all of the crazy grand shit that happens in of The Last Airbender happens in the second season of Korra. And part of what makes the third season of Korra so amazing is that it's pretty down to earth and boots on the ground about like, you know, it's like a Dragon Ball arc where they have just finished killing the crazy big bad where they're blowing up planets or whatever, and now we're kind of like back setting things up and dealing with characters kind of like as they are circumstances. Obviously, we can talk more about this, but that'll be we'll talk about that, I'm
Yeah.
sure, as you guys chew through these.
You also you need to finish Clone Wars. Um,
I do. I need to actually sit down and fucking watch it, to be honest with you. Honestly, it's a good idea for me to just like with Stranger Things, and then I've been watching all these fucking Christmas because I don't know why they were on Hulu.
yeah, fair enough. But we've stretched out the back half of this episode probably more than we should.
True.
Which is probably good though, because if we release the episode next week, it's gonna be not at the normal time. We're gonna be busy. My wedding is next week. For all the people.
True.
And I feel like a most of the usual live audience is going to be there. So
Also true.
So with that, I will say, if you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on the show, you can email us at derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. You can follow us at twitch.tv/derpsgames where these go out live. Rate, review us wherever you find podcasts, everything. All the links will be down in the description. But do you have anything else you're looking to promote?
I have nothing else that I'm looking to promote.
Yeah. With that, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.